Hey guys, welcome to Amity Tracks. So today we're going to start a new series. We'll do this occasionally, I guess, whenever one of these pops into my head. But it's a new series that I will call Albums That Should Have Been. So the way this works is, obviously these aren't records that exist, but they should have existed. So, each episode can kind of be its own little thing, but these could be lost albums, albums that were going to be put together but didn't, but we have a lot of the tracks that were recorded, so we'll try and reassemble these lost albums. Or maybe some of the tracks were kind of like that album was abandoned, but then those tracks were used later on, just sprinkled on other albums. We'll bring it back together and try and create the lost album, abandoned projects. Of course, the classic double album that should have been boiled down to a much better single album. We can do those. Or even maybe just a resequencing. There's certain albums that I think were sequenced totally wrong. But so I don't know. This is kind of a fun, this is one of those kind of what if, type of series. So the first one that came to mind that I wanted to do that I've always felt this is kind of like the double album that should have been a single album. Although technically these are two separate albums, but they were released on the same day. Talking about Bruce Springsteen's Human Touch and Lucky Town. Now, if you guys know the story here, this was the early 90s. These both came out in March of 1992. Bruce hadn't released an album, like a proper studio album, since Tunnel of Love, which was 87, I think. Yeah, something like that. So, it had been a while. There have been a lot of changes in Springsteen's life. He had moved out to Los Angeles. He had disbanded the E Street Band, at least, for the next decade or so. And so he's working with some session guys out in LA. It's kind of new for him, right? He will, of course, reunite the E Street Band by the end of the decade. But even Springsteen refers to the 90s as his lost decade. And so anyway, he was recording out there. He had recorded most of what would be Human Touch, and which is his most kind of pop sounding album of his entire career, right? And the story goes that he had one more song he wanted to go in and record to throw on here, a song called Leap of Faith. So he goes into the studio, all of a sudden gets this flood of inspiration, and ends up recording like a whole nother record's worth of songs. And so he decides we're going to have Human Touch and this other whole new batch, including Leap of Faith. We're going to create a whole new album, and he puts them out on the same day. Now, I remember when these came out, being a huge Springsteen fan, I was chomping at the bit. I was so excited. And Rolling Stone magazine, of course, as it does with certain of its favorite artists, like way overpraised these. I'm trying to remember. I think it's got 4 stars, and this got 4.5 stars or something ridiculous. Anyway, in the Rolling Stone reviews. And so, what this ended up being was 2 mediocre albums, right? Um, and this one especially, Human Touch, has not aged well. Well, it was 1992, but it just, the recording's very slick, very un-Springsteen like. But yeah, it's kind of what he was good. This was a little earthier. I think this is the better of the 2 albums. But yeah, both of them are not great. Go back. We did a Springsteen week a long time ago. Go back and see my Bruce rankings. See kind of where those lie, but it's not too high, as you might imagine. So I mean, it's long been agreed on, by fans, critics, even Springsteen himself. It seems like when you hear him talk about these, he doesn't talk about these records very much. When you hear him talk about them, like almost everyone agrees, yeah, that probably should have been a single record. All right, so we're gonna do it. We're gonna boil these down into, from 2 mediocre albums to one. I don't know if you want to say great, but really good Springsteen album. All right, so let's do it. So we have Human Touch, we have Lucky Town. What are we going to call this new album? It could be Human Town or Lucky Touch. Uh, Lucky Touch, I guess. I don't know. That sounds whatever. We'll call it Lucky Touch. All right, so we're going to boil them down into one album. Now, a couple rules here. So this is the CD era. Obviously these came out. I mean, these are available on vinyl. I just don't like them enough to ever spend the money to get them on vinyl. I have most everything else of Springsteen's on vinyl, but not these two. So, we're gonna consider this the CD era because it was, and so we're gonna give ourselves enough space on a good CD versus vinyl. So, Human Touch, which I believe is his longest single album. It has 14 tracks. So I gave myself 14 tracks. Now we have 42 tracks to work with. You might say, what? 42? Yeah, so 14 from here, 10 from here, and there are 18 outtakes that we kind of know of and have. So uh, I have it. I've kind of consolidated a lot of my CD box sets, so I don't have the artwork, but I have the CDs here. You guys familiar with the 4 CD Springsteen box set Tracks, which was, he put out, I don't know, late 90s, whenever that came out, basically comprised of outtakes and, rarities and stuff. And so he's got a whole batch of outtakes from these sessions on here. So those would be in play. Those would be in play. There's even 1 or 2 bootleg songs I have from these sessions that he didn't even make it on tracks, which would also be in play. So you add everything up, it's 42 tracks we have to play with here to make a 14-track single CD album. All right? So that's what we're going to do. And obviously, the sequencing too. We'll sequence it to make it a really good album as well. So, what I'm hoping to do here is editor will maybe can list the songs as we go. Maybe I'll move over here, and I don't know if we can fit them here. We'll see. We'll see how this works. So, I'm gonna start with Human Touch, the song, because I think, as mediocre to bad as this album is, that is a great song. That's actually a great kind of pop radio single, although it's verging on 6 minutes, a little long, but I think it's really good. And so I think that's a great opener. It does open the real Human Touch. So let's open this album with Human Touch. All right. Then in the 2 slot, we're gonna go. I think with the opener off of Lucky Town, which is Better Days. Now, I remember Human Touch and Better Days were actually first released as a kind of 2-sided single. Why don't we just do that as a 1-2 punch? Just 2 really strong kind of rockin' openers, and a little bit different, right? This is a little kind of grittier, earthier, Better Days. Human Touch is a little slicker, but just a great kind of pop rock song, still with some punch. So Human Touch and Better Days in the 2 slot. In the 3 slot, we're going to slow things down a little bit. No, actually, we're not. No, we're going to keep it rocking. We're going to take the title track of Lucky Town, which is a great song too, actually. So we're going to have like a really strong 1-2-3 punch of Human Touch, Better Days, and Lucky Town in the 3 slot. Now in the 4 slot, that's where we're going to slow it down a little bit. Okay, pacing is important in putting an album together. You got to kind of have your ebbs and flows. I'm going to go with one of the outtakes that you can find on tracks, and it's called My Lover Man, which is, I think it's actually really good. Got kind of a nice bass in there. And we're going to keep with that sort of moody bass, but pick it up a notch to a song that is quite controversial in Springsteen's catalog. A lot of Springsteen fans hate this song. I always kind of liked it. And it's off of Human Touch. It's 57 channels and nothing on. See, there's kind of a cool bass line, kind of a prominent bass line in My Lover Man, which was in the 4 slot. So let's kind of stay with that vibe a little bit, but a little more rocking with there's 57 channels, nothing on, also has a real strong bass line. So in the 5 slot, 57 channels. Then we're going to slow it down. first real ballad here, uh, with Secret Garden. Now, Secret Garden, as many of you know, ended up on his greatest hits as one of the extra tracks on the greatest hits. It's a real nice ballad with some kind of strings in there and all that. But from my research, it was first written and recorded during these sessions. So I think it's fair game. All right. So we're going to put that in the 6th slot. So after that ballad for the 7 slot, we're going to kick it up and rock it hard again with 30 Days Out, which is an outtake. I don't understand how 30 Days Out didn't make it on either of these. I think it's one of the strongest songs from these whole sessions. He didn't even put it on the Tracks box set. I have it on a bootleg, but it's from these sessions, and it kicks ass. It's a great rocker. So we're going to go with 30 Days Out. Then in the 8th slot, we're gonna have a bunch of tunes here off of Lucky Town, which is the best album here. So the Big Muddy, which is kind of this atmospheric, moody thing, which I like. And then we'll hit it with 2 songs that kind of have a similar theme to it. He had just gotten married again, much happier circumstances this time. Had started having kids, but both of these, I think, are real catchy, kind of gritty, but they're also sort of about that. So thematically, they're together. So in the 9 slot, we'll go with Leap of Faith, and then the 10 slot, Living Proof, both off of Lucky Town. The 11 slot, we're going to take another outtake off of the Tracks box set. It's going to be Sad Eyes, which is a real moody number. Again, something that should have been, I think, on these records. It would have fit Human Touch a little bit more. And then in the 12 slot, the most E Street-ish song off of either of these, which is Roll of the Dice from here. We'll put that in the 12 slot. Kind of a little throwback feel of the E Street. Um, on these sessions and in his touring band for these tours, I saw a couple of these shows. He did keep one member of the E Street Band with him, and that's Roy Bittan on the piano. So he did keep Bittan from the E Street Band. That was the only E Street member that was on these records or in the touring band on this tour. And you can hear Roy Bittan's piano, a very classic E Street piano line, like all over Roll the Dice. All right, and then number 13, I think one of the better, wittiest songs lyrically off either of these is Local Hero from Lucky Town. So that'll go in the 13 slot. And then I think the obvious closer in the 14 slot, again off of Lucky Town, is If I Should Fall Behind. Beautiful ballad. And notably, the only song from either of these records, if I can remember this right, that he ever kept in his set lists beyond this tour. so yeah, I mean, If I Should Fall Behind is the only song that he played, after this tour, live. Great song, but anyway. So there you go. So this new Human Town or Lucky Touch, whatever we're gonna call it, 14 tracks. I think the bulk is off of Lucky Town because that is the better album. We got 3 Human Touch tracks by my count, and then 4 outtakes to make. Honestly, looking at this, I think this would have been a great Springsteen album. I mean, in the top echelon, no, but it could have been up there as that second tier great Springsteen album instead of kind of the dregs, the lower end of the list that we got with these 2. So once again, as a review, Human Touch, Better Days, Lucky Town, My Lover Man, 57 Channels Nothing On, Secret Garden, 30 Days Out, Big Muddy, Leap of Faith, Living Proof, Sad Eyes, Roll of the Dice, Local Hero, and then finally, If I Should Fall Behind. That is an album that should have been.